good evening and welcome. I'd like to introduce two storytellers tonight. Our first storyteller is Coleman Luse, a sixth grader born in Roxbury, now living in North Providence, Rhode Island, with two, in my opinion, extremely attractive parents. He loves soccer, video games, and anime. He's the author of 5 comics, including his new book, Overtime, that you can find at the festival tomorrow. He's performed his story with the Rhode Island Black Storytellers for the last 3 years, and today is going to be performing an original story for you. Now, Coleman Luse. I still have the mic, sorry.
Thank you. Once upon a time, in the Elmo community, there was a child named Kira. And at school, he heard all the different ways people celebrated the holidays. Some celebrated many, some celebrated only one, and some celebrated none at all, which surprised him. One child said it was a part of their culture, but he didn't know what culture was. So he asked his friends, "What's culture?" One of them said it's what they did. The other said it was like Christmas. Oh, but Kira realized something. Everyone was talking, but nobody knew what it actually was. So he asked his mom when he got home, "What's culture?" "Culture comes from our roots." "How? How?" Kira asked. She knew it was time to show him the ancestry. One trip later, at the park, she explained culture is structured like a tree. A tree is a gathering space. A tree has branches that reach outward, but also has roots that reach deep into the ground, that just like people. She told only that we could understand. Sorry. So when he got home, he looked at the Christmas tree. "Is that culture?" "Yes," she said. She told him that the Christmas tree came from 16th century Germany Paradise Place, showing the story of Adam and Eve decorating the Christmas tree. But they later adopted that, African American culture later adopted that into putting walnuts, pine cones, and many other things onto their tree. Then had the Canara. "Is that culture?" "Yes," she said again. When Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, everyone was devastated. Dr. Mullah Karanga looked around for all the other holidays, and he made his own called Kwanzaa to remind us about love. That's him. So, culture comes from our roots, and that's what makes it special? Correct. From that moment on, Kira began to see the world differently. Every tradition, every song, every celebration had roots. Some reaching across oceans, some growing right in his living room. He understood that culture wasn't something people did. It was something they carried. And just like a tree, the stronger the root, the farther the branches could reach. So Kira kept asking questions, kept listening to stories, and kept learning how his roots are connected to others. Maybe you will too. Yes, that was it. Yeah, thank you for listening to my story. Now, back to my dad. All right, bye.
Great job, buddy. We're so proud of him, and he drew all those pictures as well to go with his story. Connecting comics and storytelling together. I love it. So next we have a performance from Chris Bell, a storyteller from Boston who finds inspiration in everyday moments as a husband and a father. Whether he's making his wife laugh, managing a tricky tenant, or facing his fears as a father, he finds inspiration in these everyday moments. A six-time Moth Story Slam winner and the 2024 champion of the Great Hartford Annual Story Slam, Chris connects with life's simple joys, especially when pizza with extra cheese is involved. Chris Bell.
Hello, sound check. So my name's Chris Bell, and I am a storyteller. The way I would describe my stories, they're like real rap. Unless I lived it, I don't write about it. It's the late 70s, and I'm about 10 years old. And there is one superhero that I want to be just like. And that's Spider-Man. I want his superpowers. One specific superpower, though. And it's not the way he can climb up walls. It's not his super spider strength. It's not the spidey sense that he has. It's the fact that he can be in a near-death experience. Doc Ock could pick up an armored vehicle and hit him in the chest with it. And he will still keep his composure and talk smack. And this is something that always gets every opponent so frustrated. They want to talk smack back to him. But before they can even open their mouth, whip, web comes out, hit them in the mouth, they get frustrated, Spidey wins. So I've always wanted to have this superpower, just to be so calm and cool and collected and keep my sense of humor. It's been about 40 years since I've been able to fit into a Spider-Man costume. And so I never really had that opportunity to develop that superpower. And one night, I'm home, it's about 3 a.m., and I'm watching when animals attack. And at this point, I am a husband and a father of 2 young kids. And I start wondering what I would do if a grizzly bear ever attacked my family. I mean, would I have the courage to stand up to it and just do whatever I can do to try to protect them? Or would fear hijack my reactions, causing me to freeze or even worse, run away? I don't know. And that's why this scenario has bothered me, haunted me, since the moment I first became a father. Fortunately, there are no grizzly bears in our neighborhood, but there have been several break-ins and robberies. Our landlord works the night shift, so he installed this big fancy security system in his luxury apartment upstairs. But downstairs in our barely basic 2-bedroom, I'm left to be my family's security system. So when my wife tells me she saw a mouse run across the kitchen floor, I see it as an opportunity to become a hero. So the next day I go out and I buy 1 jar of premium organic peanut butter. That's just like me, a little chunky. And after everyone goes to bed, I strategically put a little bit of that peanut butter on a mouse trap and place it in our kitchen. Now, this night we're experiencing waves of heavy rain and wind. It looks like someone is throwing buckets of water up against the window. And when the wind hits the house, you can hear the walls creak and groan. Around 11 o'clock, I'm just watching the news and pop, the power goes out. So sometime in the middle of the night, I wake up to a bang. And I get up and remember, oh, my mousetrap. So I get out of bed wearing nothing but my boxers, and I hear it again, bang, bang. So now I think the mouse must have got its tail caught in the trap. So it's running around the kitchen, slapping it against the walls and cabinets. So now I'm running down the hall in the dark, in my boxers, trying to get to this mouse before it tears up our kitchen. And right before I turn the corner, bang, bang, and I stop. My spidey sense, no, my inner city sense is tingling. That doesn't sound like a mouse. That sounds like a rat, and a big one. So I go to the pantry and grab a broom out of the closet and hold it like a spear from Wakanda, because I know I got one shot to stab this thing before it tries to bite me. So I carefully creep around the corner and then leap into the kitchen, only to see my mousetrap right where I left it, untouched. So now I'm standing there in the dark wondering what's making that noise. And from the kitchen door, by my son's bedroom, bang, bang, bang. Startled, I spin around and look towards the door and see the shape of a dark figure pounding on it. And that's when I realized it wasn't a mouse, it wasn't a rat. That was the sound of someone trying to break into our apartment. And just then, my son comes out of his bedroom in his Batman pajamas. And behind me, I can hear the footsteps of my wife and daughter coming down the hall. So out of pure instinct, I turn the broom sideways and slam all my body weight up against the door, trying to keep whoever wanted in out. But now I'm close enough to see that there are actually 3 figures pressing to get in. And they're all bigger than I am. And when they see me, they erupt into shouting. This causes my daughter to scream and my son to burst into tears. And I'll be honest, my heart is pounding like thunder. And I realize I need to do something, because if they get in, they could possibly hurt my family. And that thought terrified me. So I closed my eyes and pressed my face up against the window so they could clearly see it. And I did the one thing that I felt would turn these intruders away. I grit my teeth and I growled. But I growled like I was delivering a contract written in my own blood that said if they dared cross this threshold, I will show them exactly how ferocious a protective parent can be. And once I opened my eyes, the figures were completely still, and their shouting was replaced by the soft sound of rain. But now the figure up front had his arms fully extended, revealing that there was only a thin pane of glass in between my chest and his gun. And when I saw this, nothing slick or clever came to mind. In fact, my mouth was frozen, my body was frozen, and all hope just left me. And that's when I hear, "Sir, drop the stick," followed by my wife, "Babe, I think it's the police." 5 minutes later, 3 very wet police officers are standing in the center of our kitchen. Turns out the wind from the storm, it shook the house so bad that it triggered one of the motion detectors from my landlord's security system upstairs. So when a silent alarm was sent to the police station and they responded and started banging on doors and looking through windows, they saw me in the kitchen, in my underwear, armed with a broom. They thought they stumbled across a domestic situation. Eventually, I got to share my side of the story. And when I was done, the officer who pulled the service weapon stepped up and said, "So you mean to tell me I almost shot you because you was trying to catch a mouse with a broom? Don't you know all you need is peanut butter and a trap?" My wife is not going to believe this. 15 years later, my young kids are now college students. And you all might not believe this, but we have never been attacked by a grizzly bear. But if you were to ask me, what would I do? Would I run? Would I fight? I'll still be real and say I don't know. But after the night I tried to protect my family from a mouse, I am a little bit more certain that I wouldn't just run away. Thank you. A little side story. I'm in high school, and I absolutely hate English class just as much as I suspect the teachers hate me. They always had their little passive-aggressive red pen ready to make their little comments and dissect any imperfection in my grammar. I remember sitting in class and they'd be talking about Shakespeare and sentence structure, and the whole time I just wished I was home listening to Rakim or reading a Spider-Man comic book. You know, to be fair, I don't remember working very hard in class, so I always ended up passing with a C or D. And kids, English is important, but that was just my path. 40 years later, I tell stories and write them and tell them in some pretty big stages. I was at the Huntington Theater a few months ago. And after these shows, someone will always come up to me and say, you know, some professor or, you know, some doctor, and they'll ask me, they're like, are you a published author? Are you a writer? And I think my imposter syndrome kicks in, and I always kind of shrug it off and be like, no. But when I get home and I'm in my bed and I'm away from any kind of judgment, I start to think about those years I spent fidgeting in English class. And I ask myself, how did I go from that to writing and telling stories on stage? And it wasn't school, it wasn't college, it wasn't my family, and I can only give it credit to two things. All the hours I would spend listening to hip-hop and reading comic books. So that is why it is an honor to be here, to share a story with you, to say thank you for the work that you do. Thank you.
How about another round of applause for Chris Bell? All right, I think we're going to give just a little 5-minute break, and then we'll get started with the panel.
Real fast. Jason Tatum. There he goes right there. Yeah, there it is. Hold it up. It does not get any sweeter than that right there. Jason Tatum. It's a huge highlight. Another hype truck right here. Nobody on this one, but bringing the noise and bringing the fun.
Okay, are we ready to get started with this program? Everybody ready? All right. We're continuing our amazing program for you this evening with our super panel, with our special guests who are leaders in their field. I am proud to introduce our esteemed moderator, Mr. Joel Christian Gill, the chair of the MFA Visual Narrative at Boston University, and a cartoonist and historian who speaks nationally on the importance of sharing stories. He is the author of acclaimed memoir Fights, One Boy's Triumph Over Violence, cited as one of the best graphic novels of 2020. The New York Times by the New York Times, and for which he was awarded the 2021 Cartoonist Studio Prize. He wrote the words and drew the pictures for Fast Enough, Bessie Springfield's First Ride, and the award-winning graphic novel series Strange Fruit, Uncelebrated Narratives from Black History, as well as 3 volumes of The Talented Tenth, which tells the story of Bass Reeves, Bessie Stringfield, and Robert Smalls. And this is a little bit old, because I know there's more books that he's done since this was written. So, Joel Christian Gill.
You're not going to introduce everybody? He didn't tell me. I feel like I'm being surprised by this. So I would like to invite the other guests up too, David Walker and James III, and we're going to get to talking. I think that's all that's here, right? Because everybody else is stuck on planes or whatever. Okay. I'm going to give you guys because I didn't have an introduction set up for either of these folks, so I'm going to let you guys take a moment and introduce yourself. I have questions, so I do have that part done, but they didn't tell me I had to introduce anybody. So we'll start with David. Have you introduce yourself?
I'm so not ready. Hey, what's up? That's my introduction. My name is David F. Walker. That's my picture up there. That's the best selfie I ever took. It is. It's a good picture. I mean, yeah. No, I write comics, and I'm here in Boston. I'm really tired right now. So I'm saving my energy for like 10 minutes from now when I'm going to come out swinging. But I am the writer of Big Jim and the White Boy, Black Panther Party, graphic novel history, co-creator of the comic series Bitter Root, and a bunch of other stuff that I can't remember.
Frederick
And I'm just,
Douglass.
Yeah. See, stop. Don't do that, man.
Frederick Douglass. Shaft, the novels. What else? What else have you done?
We're done.
All right,
Yeah.
James. All right.
I'm James III. I'm a TV and comics writer. Chris was just talking about imposter syndrome, and I definitely have it right now. But I'm currently co-writing Stitch for Dynamite, and I have Aladdin coming up. And my company, Rule of Three, I've self-produced a handful of comics through them.
You ready for TV as well, right?
Yes.
Well, tell us what
Yeah. Fairly Odd Parents, A New Wish on Nickelodeon, a lot of stuff at Nickelodeon. I punched up Good Burger 2, and was on the reboot of all that.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming. We're going to ask some questions about the state of Black comics today. But I really want to talk about, the first thing I want to talk about, because both of you guys have written. And so one of the very first question I think I can ask, what can comics do better than film and prose? So I'll start with you, David, and then James, we'll go with you next.
Okay, so with film, it's very passive. You just sit there and you watch it. That's the end of your participation. With prose, you have to participate a lot. You're reading it, you're imagining stuff in your head. And comics falls, to me, in between the two, right? The visuals help to create what you would normally create in your head if you're reading prose. But because there's no motion and because of the structure of the pages and the panels and page turns, you are really participating more in comics. I think comics, it's my favorite medium for storytelling, and it's because of that participatory process, right? So when I'm writing and when I work with an artist, I always tell them, we need to plan out what we're leaving up to the reader. We need to make sure that there's always something for the reader to bring to the story. It can be something big, it can be something small. And the thing is, we make up our minds, myself and the artist will make up our minds, what we're leaving out specifically so that the reader can fill in that blank. But then it could be anything, right? So, someone will walk up to you and say, oh, I love how your story was a comment on the oppression of, grasshoppers. And you're like, that was not what my story is about. But you don't tell them that, right? Because you want it, the story has to become theirs. So I don't know if that answered the question.
That answers it. That's good. James, what about you? What do you think comics can do that and you more actively write all of those things. So what do you think comics can do? What can you do in comics, right, that you can't do in other things?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what David just said about the collaborative element from the reader's perspective. You really are you put that in between in, and so it's as much you contributing to it as it is the talent team that put it together. In terms of what I feel like you're able to do in comics that you can't quite do in the same way in TV and film is that sort of, there is the pressure from the artistic perspective to draw the insane thing that's going on in both of your heads, but there's an almost limitless appeal to comics, and I think it goes off of what David just said, what you're able to put on the page is so much grander because of what the reader is then also able to put on it. It's why there's so many people who are disappointed with adaptations of things, because it's not that thing that they had in their head, which is also not that thing that the person next to them that was reading it had in their head. And so just that limitlessness, that's where the limitlessness lies.
Speaking of that, for the most part, you deal a lot with comedy in your work specifically, and so how does that what do you think? So when you're watching a TV show, right, or if you're writing it, you have to think about it differently than if you're doing in comics. So timing and all of this other stuff.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about the difference and how that translates?
Yeah, I mean, one big thing that I'm sort of still grappling with is the comedic timing of the reader and the kind of how am I able to most accurately articulate the thing that is the joke for me in either the dialogue or in the, if and when you have a switch to a new panel or a switch to a new page. And so that's always a balance that you're trying to find. But I love each joke's sort of challenge, and I find as the writer and not the illustrator, I find I am most persnickety about art when it needed to be this angle for the joke to work or what have you, and sort of trying to figure out what the balance is. When can I let up so that the artist can still be creative versus when it's it definitely needs to be that in order for it's in my mind not going to be funny without X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense when you think about how comic timing works, and figuring out how the page panel, and you talked a little bit about the creativity of making sure that it works from this angle, which makes me think of something else to ask you, David, is specifically because a lot of your work, or at least your recent work, has been adaptation or historical thing. So how does writing sort of how do you write for comics when you're for example, if you're writing a TV show about Frederick Douglass, you have somebody completely different who's going to talk to you about what they look like and what they're dressing and everything else, right? But if you're writing that, you're basically creating that, and you're working in collaboration with the artist to do that. So how does that work differently in your head if you're thinking about writing for a TV show or a movie or a novel versus writing for comics?
Well, it's been a long time since I've written anything film or TV, and I'm really rusty with it. I tend to write, when I'm writing comics, I write very conversationally. So I try to write specifically to the artist. I know who the artist is. And so it's not so much a set of instructions, it's more like an invitation. And I'm saying to my artist, hey, I need you to translate this into another language, right? I did the math once, and about 30% of what I write in a script, about 30% of it actually shows up on the page in the word balloons and the caption boxes. That other 70% is translated into imagery. Now I'm a failed artist who knows how. I can't do it, but I can see it, and I can do it in stick figures. So most of the scripts that I write, most of the comic strips I write, start out like as little tiny thumbnails with stick figures. And so I figure out the pacing, and I figure out, like I'm big on, like I will say, you are not allowed to draw these two characters in the same panel until page 10. Because once they're in the panel together, it means they exist in the same space. It means they're in some sort of agreement. And so I think about like the mood and the tone, and I've been told by some of the artists I work with, oh no, your scripts read like they're meant to be movies, but they're not. Because I always think about, I just wrote a graphic novel, and my goal was to write something that would be unfilmable, right?
You mean like Watchmen?
No, just in terms of like, it's a horror comedy hip hop mashup, and I was like, I watched every horror comedy you could think of. I watched every hip hop comedy. I watched every hip hop horror comedy, and I was like, okay, I'm only looking at what's been done wrong. I'm not going to look at what's been done right, because I don't want to try to do what's been done right. I want to steal what's been done wrong, and that's what Big Jim and the White Boy is. I read Mark Twain and said, you did this wrong. That's what it's going to say on my tombstone.
But there's lots of comedy in Big Jim and the White Boy, too. Like, it's really funny, too. So you want to talk a little bit about how you approach comedy in that?
Yeah, well, that was, a lot of that was a lot of dialogue between Marcus and I, and like making sure. So Big Jim and the White Boy is a retelling of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's perspective, and it's also the premise that they're real people, and so we cut back and forth in time, and like a huge part of the story is them as old men. And all I did was watch The Muppet Show and watch Statler and Waldorf. And I was like, okay, that's what this needs. That's who they are, right? That's where I think most of the comedy came from. And we were talking about this earlier. Like, I think comedy comes, like the funniest things, and I had to explain this to my therapist recently, the funniest things are the most horrific things that have happened to you, right? Where you learn how to process them. I was that kid who wasn't supposed to be listening to Richard Pryor albums, but I was listening to them, and I was just laughing at them at the time because there was a lot of cussing in it, and I thought, oh, curse words are funny. Then I got older, and I was listening to Richard Pryor, and I was like, there's actually nothing funny about this. Right. And that's what made it so funny, right? So my approach to comedy is like probably not healthy.
Going back to comedy and the writing process, and like specifically more about like writing between writers and artists, because both of you have written for other folks. So what is something that you like, what's a problem that between writers and artists that still hasn't been solved?
Neither of you are in each other's heads. And that's the only one, right? I mean, that's like the things that get lost in translation between you and them. There's a lot of work, like literally you don't speak the same language, or just whatever, your frame of references to what you're writing is different. And I think that's the one thing, if at least on my end as a writer, and probably when the artists hear my notes or what have you, it's like, why do they not know what I was saying, you know? And why do I not know what they were trying to show me, you know? Constantly finding myself being like, well, this is the note, and then like looking at it again seconds later and realizing what I missed or what have you, so.
This will sound weird, but it's trust, right? So every artist I work with, I say in the beginning of every script, I'm like, okay, all these pages will work, all these panels will work. Like, I guarantee you 100%. But if you think of something better or something different, let me know and let's talk about it. I'm putting my trust into you that maybe you thought of something I didn't think of, right? But what I'm asking you to do is trust that this script is right. And so I've turned a corner recently within my career because I'm doing more, I'm going back into doing self-published stuff, which means I'm the boss, right? And I will fire your ass in a second if you don't get it right. And it's like, and I just had somebody recently an artist get into a fight with me, and he said, I thought you knew how to write. And I said, I know how to write better than you know how to draw, because you didn't draw a single thing that I wrote in this script. And then he's arguing with me, right? He was my friend. That was the operative word, right? So then I hired another artist from Brazil who English wasn't his first language, and he drew it properly, right? And my imposter syndrome kicked in when the original artist told me, I thought you knew how to draw. And I was like, I thought you knew how to write. And I was like, oh, maybe I don't know how to write. What? You know, and then thank God for Marcello, this guy out of Brazil who's probably using Google Translate to read my scripts. And he didn't ask me a single question, right? And it's about trust. And so the artist who I ended up firing, like, if he had just come to me and said, I don't understand what you're trying to do, could you explain it to me? But the fact is that he took it upon himself to draw something completely different than what I wrote. And during the initial arguments, I said, this isn't what I wrote. And he said, well, I didn't bother reading it. And that's the trust thing, right? Like it's comics is it's so different than film because it's usually no more than 3 or 4 people, right? And you need to have that trust in each other, and you should always have the exact same goal, which is to tell the best story you can possibly tell. Now, my job as the writer is to attempt to write that best story, but it's also my responsibility to look at the art and go, oh, wait a minute, this is better than what I came up with, right? And I've done that. That's why I love working with Marcus, because he's late, by the way, because his plane got delayed. But Marcus is the best artist I've ever worked with, because we talk about this stuff, and our goal is always the same. Make the best book possible. Not make him look like the best artist in the world, not make me come across like the best writer in the world, but to put out the best book that will live on after we're dead. Because I think about that all the time. What's the world going to be like when I'm dead? So
That was a good one. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk more about I was thinking about this thing. I have a friend. We I don't know if you know Stacey Robinson.
he owes me money.
So we have a friend, Stacey Robinson, who was a Harvard fellow for a minute here, and I went to his talk. And I may have asked, tend to ask this question a lot, but he said on the stage, and he was giving his talk, and he said, can Black artists make work that's not about white supremacy? And it kind of broke me a little bit, right? Because I think about, like, we make the things that are important to us and how powerful they are, and tends to, when we try to make things that are important, we tend to try to represent the world that we are living in, right? So how important, and I'll start with you, James, how important do you think it is for artists, specifically artists of a disaffected group, right, to make work that is telling a story about community, for the most part, everything we make is political because of who we are, but how important do you think that is for what you have to do?
I mean, I think it's unavoidable for me. It's unavoidable for me to not, like you said, talk about the world around me. And I do find myself struggling with, like, does it always have to be about X, Y, and Z? The book that I worked on with Marcus, the most recent issue, it is not about white supremacy, but the most recent issue, it is about being dead. And the most recent issue, for no reason other than what I was feeling, there's like a scene where you meet Trayvon Martin and MLK, and they're just all there, and they interact with each other. And so it's now about white supremacy and what's going, And it was not about that until that moment, but only because it was what was in me at the time, and I needed to get it. I needed to get it out and talk about that. And so, I think it's important. I think it's important for you as the artist, the writer, the creator, to write what is in you and explore those things that are in you. And so, I'm saying this because I'm sort of dancing around saying, like, if all you want to do is have fun or whatever, if all you want to do is be Drake or what have you, that's fine. Like I think that's I think it's fine, and Drake won the battle. No.
Wait a minute, isn't that what Mos Def said? Like, it was like, Drake is fine.
Yeah, but exactly. And he called it, pop, or what you play
if
at
you're
the
in Target.
Yeah. And to me, there is something to that. There's that scene in Sinners where Miles is Miles. That's not his name in the movie. But when he's playing, and it's just like every music,
You've been listening to too much Drake, is what happened.
Yeah. To me, and Drake was playing in the corner. But to me, that's what it's about. It's about exploring whatever it is that you need to get off your chest.
Do you think it can be a trap that limits artists, though? Like,
to only write about?
Yeah. I mean, or to feel that responsibility.
So
like
yes, so I'll talk about the trap side of it too. I, as someone who's constantly pitching things in TV, it goes in waves when they want that stuff. It comes and goes where they're like, we're going to do the show about police shootings, and those are the only shows we want you to pitch, and so I have actually found myself stuck in the trap of, this is what I know to write about, and this is what I know I want to talk about, and what I want to, and then when I'm faced with, like, we need our show that's just going to be fun, or we need our show that's blah blah blah, or can we get, I don't know what comp to put in, but can we get our whatever? And thinking like, but no, I want to talk about, the shootings. No, I want to talk about what it's like to be the one black person in this group of people, or whatever it is that is my experience. So it's limiting in that, and maybe that relates to what I was trying to say before, is like, it's limiting in that, like, I felt like I was told it had to be this way, or was under the impression that was the only thing that I could make. I now know that that's what I want to do and what I want to explore, but the cage of, like, this is what will sell, and the reality that is not what will always sell, to think about it in terms of, like, profits and capitalism. But
yeah, I think, exactly, capitalism. I think, as like a cartoonist, right, as of color, or people that creatives of color, we are often looked at like we can't just make a boot, right? If you write a boot, it's going to be about slavery, and so like you almost have to sneak stuff in, right? You have to sneak it in order to like get people to understand that. And speaking of sneaking in, David, when you were writing specifically about, like heavy thing, I mean, because you did that in Bitter Root, right? You snuck it in, right? It's a dope story about monster fighters, but if you start looking at the metaphors and the things that happen under the hood, it's really about racism and white supremacy. So, like, what do you think about, like, how do you balance that line between, like, like, I think about that Goody Mob song. They don't want to hear the truth. They want to lie to you, make it sound fly to you. How do you balance the lying, right? The lying that tricks people into thinking, oh, this is just a superhero story, but really it's about something deeper.
when I was a kid, and I'm old, right? When I was a kid, one Saturday afternoon, I turned on the TV and was turning the channel with the knob. That's how old I am. Like, didn't even have a remote control. And there was a movie on.
We turned the TV.
channel.
Y'all click a button. We turned the
had
TV.
to get up, walk across the room, turn the channel, then had to adjust the antenna, right? Oh, Marcus is
We
here.
got Marcus.
Everybody
give Marcus a hand.
Yeah,
Marcus coming in.
sauntering
He made it. I got to ask Marcus like 10 questions now that make up for all the questions I've asked y'all.
Well, so I'll speed up my answer. When I was about 13 years old, I saw the movie Night of the Living Dead for the first time. It was a movie that changed my life. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was about, but I knew that it was about more than what I was seeing, right? And that was the movie that really, like, triggered my interest in film. And so I studied that movie. I studied that filmmaker. I watched all of his movies, George Romero. It also ignited my passion for horror movies, a lot of which tend to be about more than what they appear to be on the surface. And so for me, there's what I know our story is about, but then I layer it. There's subtext. That's the thing I love about comics. If you do it right, you can tell maybe 2 or 3 stories sometimes on the same page. And so for me, it's like, oh, I'm always angry. I'm like Bruce Banner, in the Avengers movie. That's my secret. I'm always angry. And so I have a new comic that I did. I'm not making this up. The title is The Monster of Blackenstein, not to be confused with Blackenstein.
You ain't do the voice.
And, okay. The Monster of Blackenstein, not to be confused with Blackenstein. He was just a man until the man made him a monster. And someone said to me the other day, yo, man, you summed up what this comic is all about. He was just a man until the man made him a monster. And so I've been posting about Blackenstein for a couple of years now, saying this comic's coming. Now that it's done, I've been sending it out to people to read. You read it. And everyone was like, yo, this is way deeper than I thought it was going to be, right? It's funnier than I thought it was going to be, and it's deeper than I thought it was. And it's like, I didn't even think about it. I was just like, I'm perpetually angry about something. And if I'm not angry, I'm very sad. And either way, I want to take what makes me sad or what makes me angry and try to turn it into something funny. And my idea of funny tends to be a lot of other people's idea of offensive. So there you go. It's a very volatile combination. It's like eating Taco Bell at 4 a.m. You know you're going to pay the price later.
Marcus, you want to take a minute to just tell everybody who you are for a second?
Hi everyone. I'm Marcus Kwame. Collaborated with 2 of the gentlemen on the stage here tonight, and I love creating comics, and just glad to be part of the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you I better ask them some questions. I'm going to ask you some questions that sort of connect to what they were talking about, which I'm going to talk a little bit about Black Panther specifically. And so when you are working on something like Black Panther, like you got the script from David and you're like sitting down to do that, how do you balance being accurate versus emotionally effective?
So that's a great question. I feel like, and I'll answer about the Black Panther Party, but
Yeah.
I can.
You can bring in other stuff.
Yeah, it ties into Big Jim as well. I know for a fact that I have a certain level of emotional investment in the material, in the Panther Party. We've spoken about it many times. I was a kid of the late 80s and the early 90s, so Public Enemy was big for me, and I remember you'd start hearing the names, on Takes a Nation of Millions, and so it made me want to learn more. So I read about the party, so I was already somewhat familiar, but I learned even more, obviously, through David's script and through researching. But I would say that emotional investment in the story of the Panthers and also a feeling of responsibility in wanting to accurately tell their story with just all the complexities and all that was done to the party and all the ways in which the message of the party was distorted. So for me, when I combine that with my artistic discipline, it's obviously a lot of research, but then it's also just wanting to envision them as people. you know. So it's like I do a lot of storytelling in my head when I draw, and so like for me, there's just like little certain things. There's moments that'll be written. For instance, the confrontation with the police. I just tried to like really get into like what would Bobby be thinking in this moment? You know what I mean? What would Huey be thinking? And just try to like have that visually communicated. So I mean, just I guess the human element, you can never get too far from it.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick with you for a second, mostly because I want to say this out loud because I messaged you this, but like the jump between Black Panther and Big Jim and the White Boy, like I remember like opening up because I got the uncolored version first, and I was like, holy shit, like you had like jumped. Like I felt like your like art had just like it wasn't that it was bad before, but it just like went to another level. Can you just talk a little bit about what that?
I can speak to that exactly. So so I love like sequential storytelling, and you know, like David and I, we talked a lot about what we wanted to do with the Black Panther Party, and it was. So first of all, I will just give one anecdote. I do not really read reviews about my work. I did happen to read a couple that's, you know, out of all the praise reviews about the Black Panther Party, there was a couple reviews that were like, we'd love to see more sequential artwork, you know, blah, blah, blah. So when we were setting out to do Big Jim, first of all, I loved David's script, and it was like perfectly situated for me to go crazy with sequential stuff, you know what I mean? So there was a little bit of like spite, you know what I mean? Like just to like prove a point, yeah.
But I felt the same way. Black Panther Party, because of the book that we were contractually obligated to deliver, and because of the nature of how it was structured, there was going to be a lot of stuff that wasn't going to be sequential. And I said to you, I'm going to give you as many sequential scenes as I can give you. So when Big Jim came up, and it was like, who do you want to draw it? And I was like, well, I want Marcus to draw it because I need the world to see what we can do together for real. Like that spite was there with me too, you know. So
I mean, it's I think spite can definitely drive you. I remember reading a review because I don't read reviews anymore anyway, and I read a review what somebody said that one of my books was adequately drawn. Like out of all of the stuff that I had written, like they were like, this is adequately drawn. And I was like, I'm going to show you adequately drawn. Like the next book, it was like I was like determined. Have you, James, have you ever had something similar to happen to you where you've had someone like read a review and you just like, motivated you?
I do still read the comments, even though I know that I shouldn't. And so there's always something on each one that sort of informs the next thing that I work on in some way. And it's always those side remarks. It's always this has not motivated me nearly as much because this has nothing to do with me, but there was a comment on Stitch that was like, they charging $6 for this? And I hear it every time. I hear it every time I sit down to write another script. Like, well, this better be worth $6. Whatever I'm doing better be worth $6. And so yeah, just it is I think a shame that we sort of live in a society where you get that instant feedback on every single thing that you do. Like I don't think we don't need it on our Instagram posts. We don't need it on our books we're putting out, you know. But at the same time, it is a motivator.
When you are writing specifically, like when you write a comic, right? And like I wrote my first graphic novel, I've written a lot of graphic novels, but only the writing part was the first time I've ever done that, right? And so I've done that recently. And when I was writing about this comic, you know, it really made me start thinking about what I was telling people and what I wasn't telling them. Are there times in which, when you're sitting down writing a comic, whatever the kind of story is, where you are leaving things for the audience to fit? Like, are you basically thinking more in line with that compact that happens with a comic, that it's between the artist and the writer? Like we expect them to do some work in this, right? Are there places where you've made that decision, and can you talk about how you decide to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat early in my comics writing journey. It's been a couple of years now. And so that particular thing you're talking about is something that I am constantly working more and more at. Particularly like even just starting from a visual place in my writing versus I'm used to writing for TV, so I'm used to dialogue. And so now I'm sort of at a point now where I'm starting with the images when I'm writing a script, and trying to think about the dialogue secondary. You know, I'm placing that in for myself as I'm coming up with ideas for visuals. But in doing so, it is forcing me to think of like, well, what has been seen, what's going to be seen next, and what's that middle ground that's being left out.
Marcus, I'm going to come back to you again because I haven't asked you a lot of questions, and this is a little jarring, so sorry about that. But talk a little bit about like how you decide to depict people. Also, one more thing I want to say this because you said you both said the non-sequential things that were happening in Black Panther Party. I typically have my students do an assignment where they take the first chapter of Black Panther Party and try to reimagine it as a sequential. Right? And they just become like, they were just like, this doesn't work. And I'm like, exactly. So that's part of it. Y'all remember that doing the Black Panther Party? Yeah. Like, I'm like, we do the whole thing. And I'm just like, exactly. It doesn't work that way. So you have to do some things. So just talk about like, how do you go about depicting these events, or even like the more emotionally charged ones, right? Like
in Black Panther Party specifically,
or anything. Like you did a whole scene in Big Jim and the White Boy too, where there's some dramatic things that happen.
Yeah, like so. Just briefly on the Black Panther Party. That's very good to hear because I do, while, I was driven by that desire to prove something, and I'm, being somewhat facetious when I say spite, kind of real too, but, yeah, like what David, like, put a lot of thought into how it is sequenced and how it's balanced, and so, yeah, that did work. When it comes to like just the emotional weight and everything, I'll give you maybe two scenes, one from Black Panther Party and one from Big Jim. And in the Black Panther Party, there's a particular scene after, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed and Eldridge Cleaver, just wanted to set it off basically. And, a lot of people didn't necessarily go with him, but Lil Bobby Hutton, who was the youngest Panther at the time when the party started, he followed Eldridge, and he was he was down to do whatever. There was a lot of emotion in the air leading to it. So that sequence was one of our more sequential parts of the story, and it had to have this level of emotional weight to it because the youngest member of the party was killed. It's like a true tragedy. It also really mirrors like a lot of the shooting of young Black men. Different contexts, but the feeling is still there, and it's a tragedy. You know what I mean? Like Lil Bobby was the youngest. He was susceptible. And so. With that scene, there was a challenge of really showing the gravity of the violence of the police shooting and the overkill of the situation, but also not making it like graphic. So we had to walk a fine line. So I did a lot of the communication of the violence of that scene through colors, through like the reds, through certain tones, obviously through the line work and what I rendered, but. There was a need to show the weight through color too,
And I think you did it even more so. You ramped it up, and I remember we talked about it when we showed the killing of Fred Hampton.
Right.
And that was such a violent thing, and researching both of them was gut-wrenching for me. But with the murder of Fred Hampton, it's been so well documented. I didn't have to I think I wrote that whole sequence in a day. But with Bobby Hutton, it took days to really kind of figure it out, and I remember saying to Marcus, I was like, we want the readers to really feel something. We want them to feel the violence and the tragedy of it. I mean, Fred Hampton was 21, Bobby Hutton was 17. Like as I was writing that, I realized I'm old enough to be both fathers to both of these young men, right? And I was crying while I was writing that stuff, but I was like, we have to honor their deaths by not exploiting their deaths, right? Like, it would have been really easy to be graphically violent and disturb people that way. Like, that's the easy way, right? And the thing I love about comics and being a comics writer and working with a good artist is you figure out the easy way and then you do it the other way, right? Like, you go, okay, I want to get people to laugh, or I want to get people to cry, or I want to get people to laugh. How can I do it? And how, if I know my creative partner well enough, how can I explain it to him? And we're fortunate because we just get on the phone, right? You know, he'll call me up. I don't know how to draw this. You did that with
That tells your age right there.
yeah.
So you get on the phone.
Yeah.
That tells your age.
No, well, what we do usually is there'll be a text, and it'll be like, you got a minute to talk? And then it's like, yeah, and then that turns into like a 45-minute conversation. But I think you and I were really in that same place. It was like, how do we honor the dead without exploiting the dead?
Yeah.
And that's like...
I think you touched on something that I think is really interesting, and I want to bring you into this, James, a little bit too. But like what you were talking about, like you have to have two things, right? So if it's supposed to be traumatic, try to make it funny. Typically, that's like a lot of people. There are a lot of artists who have talked about this and talk about this idea of harmonic dissonance, right? Like you need this in a work to make it work, right? And you and I, David, we just walked past that thing at BU. There was this whole thing about sinners. Like the student had made this whole thing about sinners, right? Which has that harmonic dissonance in it, right? You've got they got this real clear tragedy, right? But there's also like real clear joy, right? At the same time. So you have that harmonic dissonance. So how do you, James, how do you like, is that something that you look for when you're like writing things and you're like creating stuff for comics and TV and everything else that you write for?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just thinking about that specifically, the book Junior that Marcus worked on, the first issue of, is about like a father and son meet for the first time in the afterlife, and it's a dark comedy, and throughout that's the whole thing. I think there's the moments of joy and the moments of sadness, and it continues to happen. Through every page, you know, I think it rings through, and I would just say that in a lot of what I work on, I do think that, and this goes off of what David was talking about, of how like sort of the things that are the funniest are the things that are the most tragic, or the things that are most gut-wrenching, is like, yes, in that pain there can be joy, and I think it's important to show that. Because there might be someone out there that is feeling or experiencing something similar.
Yeah, and can I say briefly, I feel like what you're expressing in a lot of ways ties into so much of the Black experience, right? Like, you know...
harmonic dissonance is the Black experience.
Yeah, and it's like...
Holy shit.
That's how, no, but
I'm just like making that connection.
And this is why Drake is important, because Drake is doing the pop, you know, and you feeling good, you know what I'm saying? And so it just all comes back to that.
It all comes back.
No, but we use humor every day. Like, you know, I'm grateful for some of my Black coworkers, and it's definitely a survival technique. You know what I mean? Like, even when it is about like serious and dark things. So yeah, I think that balance is very effective, but it feels natural. You know.
Yeah. I want to welcome Afua Richardson now. Come on out, Afua, with these dope sneakers. How you doing? I have lots of questions for you now that you're here, since I've asked them a bunch of questions.
I had to travel all the way from Wakanda to get here.
So tell everybody about yourself, and then I got some questions for you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Afua Richardson, and for the past 20 years, I have been an illustrator for Marvel, DC, Image, HBO. I've worked on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I've worked on Black Panther, The Hulk, Captain America, Attack on Titan. I've done illustrations for the Dark Phoenix saga, as well as Oh gosh, when you have to stop and think about it, it's just like, wait, what else have I done? Right?
We only have like 10 minutes left, but I want to ask you a
cool.
question specifically.
I've done all
So,
of the things.
and I'm sorry to cut everybody else off. I did the same thing. But so when you work, right, your pages feel musical, right? They often feel like jazz, right? Like you're pulling in a lot of different things. And I know you're self-taught, so like you're pulling in a lot of things. When you're thinking, are you thinking rhythmically when you design a page, or is it something that just comes out automatically?
Well, more often than not, I create a soundtrack when I'm drawing, especially doing my layouts.
Because you also sing too, so like,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was a classical flautist. I did an undergrad at Juilliard. I became a background singer, and I toured with a bunch of people. Alicia Keys, John Legend, Parliament Funkadelic. So jazz, funk, soul, electronica, rock, everything works as a tempo for the things that I create. And art to me is just frozen music. You know, that's really
art
all
is
it
frozen music. I like that.
It is for me.
I have to write that down.
You have the intro, and then you're led across with the verse, and you're brought down to, the chorus, and then the bridge that brings you to the next page. And so every aspect for me is a beat. And as an illustrator, you're also a cognitive writer.
Yeah.
You're problem solving information that brilliant writers will give you to solve in a way to communicate with someone. So when I'm creating things, I try to, shorter, smaller movements, faster movements are smaller panels, and the bigger, grander things are longer notes that people have to spend more time on.
Yeah. So I think out of everybody on here, I think you and David have probably worked the most with mainstream comics, right? And so what is something that people often romanticize about the comics industry that you think is actually broken? I didn't ask David this first because he would talk for an hour and a half. Everybody can answer that question, but I'm going to start with you.
I think the presumption that if you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life is lost on those who haven't had to employ their passions. Because your creativity is not a faucet. It doesn't just come on when you want it to. And sometimes you have to make things even if you don't feel like it. So your craft, which is very emotionally based, now has to become technical. You really have to push your limits. What can you make when you're not feeling good? What can you create when you're just not feeling it? How do you put yourself into the right state of mind to be able to create when you have to? And those are things that, creatives have to figure out. What sets them in the mood? Is it music? Is it dance? Is it, eating the right foods? Is it, getting yourself into almost a ritual before you sit down and prepare yourself to create? Sometimes they say good things.
I just agree with everything that was just said. I mean, it's the right nowness and or it's sort of it's like hair on a stick type of thing where you kind of feel like it's there in front of you and it's being made in front of you, like it's always out of reach. That's what working on like an established technique sometimes feels like. And you also don't get to you may not get to do the thing you want to do while you're working on that thing, just because you have an idea that vibe with it, and you got that job. The final vision has to vibe with a giant book filled with rules and things that you have to abide by. So there is a lot of elements that I think that can seem to feel from a distance that just becomes challenging, I think, when you're working.
David?
Okay, so I've been really fortunate. I'm probably the luckiest person in this room, at least when it comes to comics, because I've worked on just about every character that I've ever wanted to work on. There's a handful I haven't. But when you're working at that high level, right, when you're working for a Marvel or a DC, you are working on somebody else's property. Now, my philosophy as a writer is that every character I work with becomes real to me, right? They are a real person. But that person belongs to someone else, which means I'm just an overseer on the plantation. That's all it is. That's the most unromantic answer I can give you. The best romantic answer I can give you is it's a lot like being a sharecropper working for Marvel or DC, right? That's the truth, right? Would I go back to a DC? No. You know how they say never? Never, ever, ever, ever. Marvel I'd go back to, because at least the slop they feed us is a little bit better.
You know what's funny is like you're saying this, and before I let Marcus answer, I want to say, you reminds me of this conversation we had like 10 years ago, and you said, I was writing for Cyborg. You were writing for Cyborg, and you said, I had this really poignant moment between a father and a son, and they were talking, and you said the editor came back and was like, can you make this during a fight?
Oh man, one of the notes was, could you make him more thuggish? And I was just like, no, but I could become more thuggish in this moment.
You want to see it thuggish?
So I learned that early on. I got my big break in comics late in life. I was well into my 40s when it finally happened. So it's also what's the worst that's going to happen? You're not going to hire me again? And that's what's happened. I survived. DC won't work with me ever again, but that doesn't matter because I won't ever work for them. It's like, you're fired. You can't fire me. I quit.
Marcus, what do you think is something that people often romanticize that in the comics industry that you say is often you would say is awful?
Yeah, I mean, well, Afua started out by dismantling a bit, or critiquing the idea of if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, because I firmly believe that the majority of people working in comics are doing it because they love it. At some point, they read something that resonated, and just the unique aspects of this particular medium of storytelling, just really grabbed them, and that's what's kept us here, because it's not the wealth, right?
Hundreds of dollars.
I mean, but it's like so there is a lot of love to it.
My socks got holes in them, bro.
Yeah. And so, for me, it's like I have not worked on a mainstream comic. As a kid, Marvel, DC, and some manga really pulled me into this medium. It showed me what was possible. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then, so right now, I've already lived my dreams without even having worked for Marvel or DC, just by the fact that I'm paying some of the bills, by drawing and creating stories. And
you won some awards too, so let's not just put that on.
Sure. But you know what though? My daughter can't eat the awards. So it's like, no, but seriously,
if you boil them, they get really soft.
Right.
You can boil an eye.
Check the pH levels. But so I guess for me, it's just that this medium I love working in, and I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. I think David's point about if you work for Marvel and DC, you could write some really emotionally powerful thing, and then the next writer could just be like, or the next editor could be like, yeah, we're not gonna do that anymore. You know what I mean? And we're going a totally different direction. And there is something to be said about having a relationship with the characters you're writing, and really being in their head. And a lot of the storytelling that you're doing isn't obvious on the page, but it, know, and why people are doing something, and those things do come through to the readers, even if they're not consciously thinking oh, he took his jacket off between page 17 and 18 for this specific reason. There's so much to every decision that's made. So, if people can find success with Marvel and DC, that's great, but it's not necessarily the only path in comics. There's so many stories to tell. There's so many avenues to tell them. And honestly, I think having some level of ownership over your stories, that's my goal. You know,
Right.
that's kind of where I want to be headed and continue. So, you know.
So I'm going to ask this last question. It's got to be short. I'm going to start with you, Afua.
Okay.
You know, when I tell people about you, I always say Afua drew some of those hip hop covers, right? Like that's one of the things that I say. I don't say Spider-Verse, which is funny. But so what do you want to be known for? Like when all is said and done, when people say Afua, what do you want them to connect you to?
The Book of Myrrh, which is something that I'm writing now. And it's taken me a while to get through it because I had to get through a couple of health things. But, you know, drawing things for Marvel, DC, Image, all of these different companies, it's cool. You know, it's like, well, you know, I liked those things when I was a kid. And you know what? It beats, you know, working someplace where at the end of the day I'm not proud. And I am proud of the things that I've done, even though I don't own them. But I want to be known for a world that I've created and characters that take you on a journey. So I've been working on it for a while, but the Book of Myrrh is going to connect both my artistic and my musical roots. And it's about a modern retelling of aquatic myth and legend from all over the world and connecting music to family, music to blood, music to water. So that's what I want to be known for. I want to be known as not a professional comic book artist, not a former singer or flute player or any of those things, or any of the companies that I've worked for. I want to be known as a universal artist that makes you think and makes you feel something and makes you want to go and create something of your own. That's what I want to be known for.
James, that's a good answer.
Yeah, I mean,
that wasn't short. Sorry.
Hopefully that, you know, I was funny and I took people to fun, imaginative worlds. You know, I hope that I can be remembered for that. You know, I can't put it to a specific project. I don't think. I mean, Junior is the most expressive I've ever been in anything I've ever worked on. But I hope that it does that. I hope that it is funny and it takes people to fun, imaginative worlds.
David?
I just like to be remembered for speaking so well. No, seriously, I already know what I'm going to be remembered for, and I'm happy and I'm proud of it. And that's the two books I've done with Marcus. We're planning out a new book, and I would like to be able to say that, you know, that this team created like essential, like we're calling it like a spiritual trilogy, right? Black Panther Party was the first one, Big Jim and the White Boy was the second one, and now we're working on the third one. And I feel like I wouldn't necessarily want to leave comics after we do this third one, but I feel like that would be it. That would be my, you know, whatever, songs in the key of life, or, you know, what's going on, you know.
Songs in the key of life, that's big. That's right up there with the Chronic.
Yeah, right.
Marcus.
I think I just want to be remembered for being an honest, you know, storyteller and artist. When when it comes to making a living, there's so many things we do. I've filed papers coming out of college for insurance companies, all kinds of things that didn't, like, you know, at all satisfy my creative soul. But, you know, creativity is where I'm at home. And I think I just want people, I don't need people to be like, he was the best, he was this. You know, I think if people know that, like, you know, he loved art and he loved his people and he put his soul on the page or the canvas, that's more than I could ask for.
That's good. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for coming out. It's been a great conversation. Sorry we didn't get to ask more questions for everybody, but I think we got it. So thank you all for coming, and I appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow because we'll all be around tomorrow. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.